Just get the screen going again. Okay, this is where we left off. Doesn't that make sense to everyone that's looking at this right now? Oh yeah, I get what he's talking about. Need a little orange, blue, and red in my life, and now I'm protected. Well, this is what we're going to do is we're going to start breaking these things down for you and showing you how to go about protecting residential real estate. So, say you have some properties. You had 4 rentals. Now, how might you go about protecting those? What type of entity structure would you consider implementing? Well, I can tell you what I used to explain to people, and it was wrong, right? I mean, it wasn't necessarily wrong. It was coming from the wrong spot, because when I looked at real estate investing, 20 years ago, and I talked to people about asset protection, if they had 4 homes, I would look at their equity. Literally, what I would do is I would say, all right, what type of equity do you have in each property? And let's say we had 4 properties here, and each property had $50,000 in equity. So 4 at 50K equals $200,000 in total equity amongst all 4 properties. So I would run this little cost benefit analysis in my head, and I would talk to a client, and I would say, all right, well, the most you stand to lose is $200K in the event of a lawsuit. Say you had a bad lawsuit and somebody came after you. If we took all of these properties and we placed them into one box, say an LLC, if something happened with this property, the most you could potentially lose is this one, and this one. But I know it's 4 homes, but look at it from the equity standpoint, because the equity is all you have at risk. And so in this case, it's only $200,000. So maybe a strategy would be every time you have 200 to 250 in equity combined in houses, you put those in one LLC, and then you create a second LLC for the next 4 houses or 3 houses, whatever it's going to be. And I made this recommendation based upon being young and not really thinking about why people invest in residential real estate. Okay. Because each of these homes right here, these 4 homes, let's assume that they generate income of $6,000 a year. So they generate total for $24,000 in income. When you're thinking about risk of loss, and I see a lot of attorneys talk to clients and they make this fundamental mistake. They look at the properties, they look at the equity, and they don't understand why someone's investing in residential real estate. Do we invest for equity? No, right? You can't eat the equity. It doesn't sustain you. You're investing for the income. That's why you're making these investments. So when I made a recommendation to someone, hey, put all 4 properties in one LLC because the total equity is only $200,000. What I was really telling them is, hey, take your entire $24,000 annual income stream that that has allowed your wife to quit working, that's allowed you to send your kids to private school, whatever it is, the vacations that you're doing, put all that at risk. So if something goes wrong, it's going to fundamentally change that lifestyle of yours that you become accustomed to, that real estate's been able to provide for you. Now I put that in jeopardy for you, because not only are you going to lose the equity, you're going to lose that income stream, because that's why you're investing. You want to protect your income stream. So for residential real estate, our recommendation is that you set up one LLC per property, just like this. I mean, this is why we came up with our titanium program, to help people do this. So they can, set up an unlimited number of LLCs, and they're not worried about that ongoing investment to create the structures, because that's really where I was teaching from. I was making a judgment call for people at the time, and by telling them to put 4 properties in there. And actually what came about is somebody asked me, he said, well, do you do that for your parents? I said, no. And they said, well, why would you do that? Tell us to do that. So separate out your properties like this. And now if something were to go wrong with this LLC up here, yeah, you could lose this. But don't look at it as what you lost. Look at, by making that investment to create this type of plan, what did I gain? What did I save? What you saved from this investment to put these assets in this type of protection is that you saved yourself $18,000 a year in income. You saved yourself $150,000 equity. Isn't that a much better place to be in? By making that small investment to put these things, protect them properly, now you preserve that income stream. So yes, it does take a hit, but it's not going to be possibly life-changing for you. It's not going to alter your plans to the same degree it would be if you lost all 4 properties. And this is the exact same structuring I do with my daughter. She's a real estate investor. She has now 3 properties. Each property is in its own separate LLC. And if you asked her, would she consider grouping them together? She would look at you and say, no, never. Why? Because she likes getting that rent check every month deposited into her account for $400 or $600, depending on the property. And that means a lot to her. She wouldn't want to jeopardize any of that in case something went wrong with one of those deals. Now, I get it. You're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, well, Clint and Toby said they have 300 properties. So does that mean they have 300 limited liability companies? Hell no. I'm not that crazy, right? To create 300 LLCs. No, this is, again, it's about planning, understanding where you are with your investing, because the misconception that I see time and time again about asset protection planning is that people tend to think this, that you have Clint and Toby right here with 300 properties, and you have this investor over here with 4. And they'll say, well, Clint and Toby need more asset protection than this person because they have 300 properties. But you might be surprised to look at it from the opposite standpoint, to realize that's not the case. This person right here who has 4 properties has more to lose. They have more to lose with their structuring if they don't follow the steps that I've just showed you here. It's going to be life altering for them, where it's not life altering for us if we lose a few properties, meaning this, that with our structuring, we're comfortable putting 10 properties per LLC. So we have 30 limited liability companies, each of them holding 10 properties. And granted, we could lose a 10-pack. Something goes wrong, a house burns down. We have 2 properties burned down this year. Didn't get sued over it, but no one got hurt. If someone did get hurt, would that have resulted in a lawsuit? Absolutely. But here's the thing. This one LLC that has 10 properties in it, let's say it generates $50,000 a year in income for us. Now, if we lost that $50,000 a year, does it change my lifestyle? Is it going to change the wine that I'm drinking when I go out to dinner or that I order up to have at home? Not at all. Why? I know you say, well, 50,000 is a lot of money. It's relative. It's a lot of money until you look at it and you say, well, gosh, they have 29 other LLCs throwing off $50,000 a year. I guess it's not that big a hit. No, because I mean, I'm not spending all that money, right? You can't spend, well, some people could, but I definitely can't spend all that. So to lose 10 properties sucks, but it doesn't alter my lifestyle. Whereas if you're in this position, or you're just starting out and you lost all 4 of your investments, guarantee you that's a change. That's going to have a huge impact on you. And so I tell people, when you're starting out, first 10, 15 properties you have, follow these steps. 1 property per LLC, because that's when you're most at risk. That's when it can do the most damage to you. That's when you're prone to make the mistakes because you don't have the experience that we have right now. And then let's start looking at strategies of grouping as you continue to grow your portfolio. And the thing about LLCs is that, you can set them up so that they're easy to maintain. You don't have to file tax returns for them because you make them disregarded entities. I'll show you a little bit on that here in a minute. And so if you're thinking conceptually, well, that's a lot of work. No, it's not. It doesn't have to be. You can make it a lot of work if you want it to be, but the way we like to do things is we like to keep it simple. And I like to keep it simple for myself, and that's what I'm going to do for my clients as well when we're creating their structures. So 1 LLC per property. You should be writing that down. 1 LLC per property till about 15 properties, then I can start grouping. Now, I've been talking about the limited liability company as being an entity to hold rental real estate, residential real estate. Well, does that mean it's a one-size-fits-all approach? No, it's not. I explained to you earlier, there are other tools that we need to consider when you're putting together your structure. So let's talk about the Series LLC for a minute. So the Series LLC is a limited liability company, but it has some unique attributes to it that allow us to actually realize some savings when it comes to putting together this structure. And so what it is, it's a limited liability company. You set it up. Let's say we set this up in Texas. So we'll set up a Texas series. So we have to specifically file as a series. When we create the company, we register it as a Series LLC. And if you do that, then it allows you to create what are loosely referred to as cells. And a cell is similar to a separate red box. So a cell is basically a separate LLC. But the difference between the two is that a separate LLC requires a state filing to set it up. With cells, we don't need to register it with the state. Well, in Texas, you have to file a DBA, but it's simple. It's a quick little filing that gets done for the cell. But the point is this, you don't have to go through the same process. And if you need a new cell, it's a 2-page agreement. You just create, you sign it, and now you can take title in this cell. So the Series LLC is an attractive structure for many people. Now, the problem is that the Series LLC is not widely recognized. So if you're going to use this type of structure, you're only going to be using it in those states that recognize it. So if you were investing in Texas, I would recommend you set up a Series LLC, just like I just showed you here, and all the cells would be owned by the parent. It's like that. That's how I would structure my rental LLC in Texas. My properties would be held in separate cells. Now, if something goes wrong with a cell, then it's just the cell and its assets that are at risk. The other cells are protected. So the Series LLC, it's a great tool, and it can be used in I don't know, about 18 states is where you'd use this type of structure if you were so inclined. Now, if you're investing in a state that has a transfer tax associated with moving property into an LLC, then you better be familiar with this tool, which is called a land trust. So we use land trusts typically a lot of times. I mean, you can use them anywhere. I mean, we're going to be using more land trusts going forwards because when you have a rising interest rate environment, land trusts tend to be used more in the overall planning. But for sure, you use them in Tennessee and you'll use them in Florida. Okay, you're going to use land trusts. If you own property in either of these two states, you're using land trusts. And you can use them in other ones as well. We use them in all 50 states. But I just want to hit on these two because it's really important you understand the transfer tax issues that come up. So if you own a piece of real estate in Florida, all right, and it has a mortgage of $180,000 on it, and you've listened to me talk and you say, all right, I know what I need to do. I need to create a limited liability company in Florida and deed the property into that LLC. Well, you could do that. But the problem is when you transfer that real estate into the LLC in Florida, you're going to get hit with a transfer tax. Do you really want to pay a transfer tax? I don't want to pay a transfer tax if I don't have to. So the way you avoid paying a transfer tax for your Florida real estate that's encumbered by a mortgage is you create a land trust, a Florida land trust, and you transfer your property into the Florida land trust. That is exempt. You don't have to pay a transfer tax when you transfer real estate into a land trust in Florida. You know, in Florida, actually, they give you some asset protection with your land trust as well. So if something happens inside of the trust, the property's protected. So if you own real estate in Florida, you're going to want to use a land trust if that property has debt on it. Now, oftentimes we'll take that land trust and we'll put it maybe into a cell of a Series LLC. So we'll give it a little extra protection here by doing this into separate cells, something like that. But this structure here that I just showed you is exactly how I would handle your Tennessee properties as well. Because see, in Tennessee, when you set up a structure, if you don't set it up the right way, your LLC, then you can be subject to an annual franchise tax. And a lot of people blow this that invest in Tennessee. I met with an individual a couple of years back, and I looked at his tax return. And I said, I'm going to save you $45,000. You're going to be so happy you signed up as a Titanium client, because starting next year, you no longer have to pay Tennessee $45K. And he was like, how am I going to do that? And I said, because I'm going to restructure everything you've set up the wrong way into the right structure, so it's not subject to that tax. Because his CPA had set up structures for him such that they were held in a way in which made them subject to a franchise tax on the asset's value. But in Tennessee, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll use land trusts to hold title to the property, not subject to that. And then we'll have the interest held in a cell of a series LLC. So you can get the protection that you're looking for without having to pay the tax. And so what I'm saying with these tools is you got to be aware, of the importance of what type of tool you need to use in which particular state. Or it's not even the tools, it's also strategies. Say you invest in Pennsylvania, right? And I don't care if you want to set up a land trust in Pennsylvania or you want to use a limited liability company. Can't use a series, they don't recognize it, but if you want to use a land trust or a traditional LLC, and you have a piece of property, right? And if you deed it into either one of these entities, that is a taxable transfer in Pennsylvania. And people will tell you, we deal with this all the time. People from Pennsylvania say, yeah, Clint, I'd like to use your services. I want you to protect my real estate, but my guy told me this, it's taxable, that I can't deed property into an LLC, can't deed it into a trust without creating a taxable event. He's accurate, but he missed a little point there. The transfer tax only applies when you record your deed. So this is what you can do in Pennsylvania. You can set up an LLC. So my property into the LLC, but do not record. So we tell our clients, don't record it, because once you record it, that's what triggers the tax. When you deed property into an LLC, when we prepare the deed for you, you sign it, you deliver it to the LLC, that property is now owned by, legally, it's owned by the LLC. So if somebody brings up a claim, even though it hasn't been recorded yet, it's the LLC that owns the property. You don't have to record a deed to make the transfer official. That is a misconception so many people have. And I've dealt with it before on my YouTube channel. People challenge me on it, and I'll actually go up and I'll pull the statute and I'll say, show me in the statute where it says you got to record a deed. Well, I was told. And it's like, I don't care what you were told, just read the statute, okay? You'll see what I'm talking about. Recording's not required. So this is a way for people who invest in Pennsylvania to protect their assets, so you can deed it right in. Now, let's say you want to invest in California, all right? So in California, here's the problem. If you live in California or you invest in California, you all know about this. $800 per LLC. So when we start talking about doing this, many times, people who live in California or invest in California start going, oh man, that's 4 franchise fees. That's $3,200 a year to protect my assets in California, my investments. And it's a stumbling block for some individuals. And I'll often question them. I'll say, okay, so I get it. It's $800 a year to have that LLC set up in California to hold that real estate. But how much do you generate in annual income from that property? Oh, this property here generates $24,000 a year net income. Okay. And the fact that you have to pay $800, that's throwing you off here with this planning. And some people, it does. Personally, for me, it wouldn't, right? But if I'm working with that California client and they're investing in North Carolina, where on average, you're going to be making about $5,000 a year, and California takes the position that if you live in California and you have an LLC set up in North Carolina, it's still subject to the $800 tax that it's doing business in California. Well, now that's a different scenario, right? Because $800 is almost a fifth of your income. So I get it. So that's why what we've designed for people who either invest in California or live in California, invest anywhere else in the United States, and you want to avoid paying $800 a year franchise tax, use a Wyoming statutory trust. So what we do is we set up a trust in Wyoming. Okay, so this one's it's set up in Wyoming as a trust. Then we foreign file it in California. So we register it in California. Now, in California, when you register this trust in California, it's not subject to the franchise tax because the franchise tax only applies to the LLCs and corporations and things like that. So we set it up in Wyoming, foreign file in California, and then it takes title of the real estate. Like an LLC, if something happens with the property, our client is protected. So I've done this many times. I have clients that have 4 statutory trusts set up for their investments. And if anything goes wrong, those statutory trusts are protecting them, plus they avoid paying the franchise tax. Now, they go outside of California. Let's say they're investing in North Carolina. Well, then we just flip this around. I'll create a statutory trust here for California resident, and then I'll tell them, hey, create North Carolina LLCs and have them all owned by the statutory trust. And they'll say, well, wait a minute, you said LLCs are subject to tax in California if I own it. I said they are if you own it, but do you own it? No, you don't, do you? You own a trust that owns these limited liability companies. I hope you're seeing the magic that comes from proper entity structuring, how you can work around these types of roadblocks or unfair tax laws that states enact, trying to collect every little nickel they can out of their residents. And I mean, think about it. An LLC in North Carolina, how do you justify saying it's doing business in California? Because it's not, doesn't own any assets, doesn't make any income there. Just because someone lives in California, now it's doing business there and you have to pay $800. It just doesn't compute for most rational people. So what we do then is we work around it. Oregon is another situation where I'll use a statutory trust. Somebody wants anonymity. You can't get it with an LLC. I can get it with a statutory trust. So there's uses for entities depending on where you're investing. Now, it doesn't matter if you're investing in your own name or you're investing through a self-directed IRA. Because remember earlier I brought up an IRA and I said, hey, use a self-directed IRA. Was it having to do with a Roth? I showed you how to make tax-free money on rental arbitrage or lease options. Well, make sure if you invest with your retirement funds, you're following the same advice I'm teaching you here. And I'll show you why this is really important. Unfortunately, one of our clients received this lawsuit. He has several properties inside of his self-directed IRA. So he has a self-directed IRA. Oh, wrong color. He has a self-directed IRA set up. And in that self-directed IRA, he has about 15 homes. Now, on one of those properties, a tenant's friend, I'm an invitee that they brought over. They came over, that's hanging out there. This guest was injured on the property. You can see it right here. It says plaintiff Kathy Harris was a guest at this property located in Indiana. And she was hurt when she fell down the staircase. So what did they do? The attorney now is suing his IRA. And I called him up. Well, he sent this in. He's a platinum client, titanium client. I mean, he gets many LLCs as he needs. He gets all the legal advice he needs, no charge. He called me up, wanted to get a consultation going. We sat down, we started talking about it. He said, I just don't get this. I said, what don't you get? And he goes, they're suing my IRA. I said, I know they are. He said, but IRAs are protected. I said, IRAs are only protected from claims against you, not claims against the IRA. I said, so one of the things we do is we create blueprints for all of our clients to show them what they need to do for their asset protection. And I pulled his up. And I said, remember, we went through this, right? We had your IRA set up with LLCs that should have been owned by your IRA, and the properties need to be inside of there. Because we did that on the outside, Said, you signed up for Titanium for a reason, so we could do all this for, low investment to get this thing going. But why didn't we do it over here? And he said, hey, that's on me. He goes, I don't know. I just didn't think it was an issue there. That's the problem. So now his IRA is having to fight this lawsuit. So guess who has to pay for that? His insurance company's covering it. And whatever the insurance company doesn't pay, his IRA is going to pay. So if you're investing with a self-directed IRA, do not take the risk and hold those assets directly in the IRA. Use limited liability companies or land trusts or series LLCs. Talk to us. We'll figure out the right structure for it, because it takes a lot of time to build up that type of wealth inside of an IRA. And one lawsuit like this could wipe out 20 years of contributions. And how, you're just not going to get that back. And so there's a lot of risk there that you definitely want to make sure you're protecting against. Okay, so the thing about this, with this investing that I want to bring in mind, is that when you're putting these structures together, you're getting the LLCs. We're talking about setting up LLCs and things like that, and series LLCs and trusts. But when you create an LLC, one of the things you should be paying attention to is what type of information is the state collecting about you? Because one of the things that I think is really important in a lawsuit, or avoiding lawsuits, is to have assets that are not discoverable by a potential creditor. I grew up, when I was in law school, I worked for a personal injury firm. And, the claims that they loved the most, the juiciest claims, were the defendants that had the most assets. That's where I would spend a lot of time drafting my demand letters. The people that didn't have any assets, they didn't put much effort into it. They're just going after the policy limits. But if they knew you had assets, oh yeah, Clint had to spend double time working on those demand letters. And they're just shakedown letters, is what I was commissioned to write. I made really good money doing it. But the point is, what I learned from that experience is that too many people hold assets in such a way that are associated back to them. And it makes it really simple, like Harold and Harold, to find out where they live, to apply pressure, to get them to settle. So when we set up structures, highly recommend you do this. I've done it for myself. Toby done it for himself. We've done it for many of our clients. Set it up so people don't even know you have the company, that you own the asset. And the way you do that is understanding how an LLC is set up. See, when you set up an LLC, say I was setting this LLC up in Washington State, they're going to want to know the name of the company. So I give them the name. And then on the articles, they're going to ask me, well, who is the registered agent? Okay, so you have to appoint a registered agent. That's an RA. Well, if you're setting it up yourself, typically that's going to be you. You'll list your name and your personal address there. You can't use a PO box. So your name and address will go on there. Then they're going to ask you for a business address. Okay, if you don't have a PO box set up, then you're probably going to use your home address. And then they're going to ask for who is the member or manager of this LLC. Now, see, this is important for you to understand. When you create a limited liability company, there are two different management structures you can select from when setting up this LLC. One can be a manager-managed LLC, where you appoint one or more entities or people to serve as its manager. Or you can elect to choose a member-managed LLC, where the members are the ones who are going to control the affairs of the company. So you have to choose which form you want to operate under. Now, regardless of the form that you choose, Washington will ask you, if you choose manager-managed, give us the name, which would be you, if you're the manager, I assume you are, an address, so it's your address, of the manager. If you chose member-managed, then they'll say, give us the names and addresses of all the members. So you can see how many touch points now you're being associated back to this company. And then they want to know who is the organizer. And that is, the organizer is the person that submits the filing. So when you set up your own LLC, you're your own organizer. You're going to put your name on there. So then it's you. Then what you do after you've set up your LLC is you put a property into this LLC like this. You deed your property in. And then a guest of a tenant is injured on that property, and the attorney sues the LLC and they sue you individually. Why? Because your name's all over it. So they're going to try to apply pressure to you to bring you into the lawsuit. Now, whether or not that claim has any traction, it doesn't matter. Just the fact that you get sued personally is going to be enough where you're going to sit and start going, oh my gosh, you're going to freak out. You know, first couple of times you've been sued, it's stressful. Seventh time, like, I've been through this before. It's easy. So you know what you're going through. It's like guys I've talked before and said, oh yeah, I'm on my fourth divorce. Of course, they have no assets, but it's easy for them. They've been through it before. So you don't want to be in a scenario where someone can see all this information about you, because if they can, then they can run an asset search and determine how much pressure do I want to bring to bear on this individual to get them to meet my demands. Because if I know if they have assets, then I can put pressure on that and get them to settle and meet my demands, because I'll threaten to take all their other assets and they won't be able to stomach the fight. So what we want to do is ensure that your tenants don't know that you own the property. I want to ensure that the creditors, your personal creditors, don't know that you have these assets. I want to ensure that the attorneys that represent potential plaintiffs don't even know what assets you own. And it's really simple to do. And it's one of the biggest mistakes we see time and time again with people who set up their own structures or work with people who don't understand this technique. It's amazingly simple. All you need to do is this, is you've set up a Wyoming LLC. I'd say about 95% of our clients utilize this technique that I'm showing you here. You set up a Wyoming LLC. And the reason we set up in Wyoming, because when you set it up in Wyoming, they want to know the name of the entity. They want to know the registered agent. Well, that's going to be Anderson. So it's never our client. They want to know a business address. We give it an address. So our clients, we give them an address. So it's Anderson. So we have a Wyoming address we provide to our clientele that they can use on their business entity. So we give them a business address, and then they want to know who is the organizer. That is the person that submitted the filing. And again, that's going to be Anderson. So we list all this information out on there as follows. So if somebody looks at this entity here, if they pulled up the name of the Wyoming Limited Liability Company, they won't know who's involved, because what does this entity not, what does Wyoming not ask for? Who are the members? Who are the managers? They don't collect that information. So you can create this, what we refer to as an anonymity compliant LLC. This is the foundation that's going to provide you untold amount of protection, because once that's set up and that's your base foundation, then when I set up my Washington Limited Liability Company up here, here's what we do here. We forget about all this garbage. That ain't happening. We're coming up with the name of it. RA, it's going to be Anderson. Business address, we provide that as well for our clients. So we give them a business address. And this is a great thing for a lot of you that invest out of state and you're wondering, what do I use for a business address? And you end up putting your California address on there or your Texas address on that Tennessee property. Not anymore. We give you an address. Member or manager. Here's what you do. You set up this red box as a member managed LLC, and the member is your Wyoming LLC. So here we list the name of the Wyoming Limited Liability Company. Since we submitted the filing, we put Anderson here. Now, if there's a creditor out there and they're looking, let's say the tenant, I've got my property set up here. My red box is called Running with Knives LLC. Okay, smart thing to do. So you got Running with Knives Limited Liability Company that is set up, that is owned 100% by I Like to Hurt Myself LLC down here. So if somebody looks at Running with Knives Limited Liability Company and they say, who's involved with Running with Knives? It's going to say, I Hurt Myself is the member. And they go, oh, I want to find out who's involved with I Hurt Myself. And so they go and they look up I Hurt Myself. And there's no information associated back to it. So they don't even know. You're sitting down here, you're the member and manager of this company, you own it all. And so it provides you this anonymity shield. And this is the benefit of that. So a client was involved in a situation where they were being sued for well over $10 million. And this lawsuit, I mean, yeah, if it went to trial, they would have had liability there. But the thing is, I started working with them. And I put together a structure for them, and we set it all up so that all their assets were completely protected like this. Well, during the discovery phase, they negotiated a settlement with the plaintiff's attorney where they took their policy limits and left them alone, and they kept all their assets in place. Why was that able to work that way? Because the attorneys thought that my client didn't have anything, that the only thing worth getting from them was the insurance policy, because you don't have to tell someone what you have in a lawsuit. They cannot discover that until after they get a judgment against you. And that's going to take several years. And so if you're an attorney and you're thinking, all right, how do I get paid? Make sure my client gets paid or make sure I get paid. I want the quickest route there. And if I don't think this person has any assets because I can't find anything in their own name, then what I'm going to do is take their policy limits and move on, because I know this, that if I want to fight, they're going to spend that policy limit on litigation. And then there's $1 million here today, 3 years from now, it may only be $500,000. So I'm better off accepting that today where I get the full amount rather than having the insurance company spend the policy limits down in litigation costs. That's what this does for you. And that's why I keep saying, I've been telling you, anonymity is really powerful. It keeps you out of lawsuits. And so we like to use this, but you have to set it up right the way I've just described, because otherwise you can make mistakes. Here's a client of mine sent me this email. You can read it here. It says, "Hey, Clint, they served me with the small claims court summons, and I'm now getting mail to my house. So they found me. How did they find me? I don't understand. My name wasn't associated. I wasn't listed as the member of this LLC or something like that, or the RA, because she used a professional registered agent. So she set this one up before I started working with her. And so I went and I pulled the filing. I said, I know how they found you. They found you, even though you used a PO box for the business address, they found you because you were the organizer. You filed this yourself. So everything else that you did may have protected your identity, but the fact that you submitted the filing, that's how you blew it. So they just traced your name, found out where you live personally. That's why they served you at your home. If they didn't have that information, can you imagine how difficult it would have been to perfect service? Really difficult on her if they wanted to come after her individually. So this is why we set up the structures the way we do. Now, there's another benefit that comes from this, and this is going to help you do more. As I stated earlier, when you set up entities the right way, if you do it with this in mind, they will help you get more deals done. People sometimes don't appreciate that entities can help you actually do more when it comes to investing. And the way we do that is how we set them up from a tax standpoint. So when I create that structure, and I've got that Wyoming LLC down here, let's say you've set something up where you've got a red box up here. Maybe you've got a Texas series also owned down here with some cells like that. Maybe you got a Florida land trust also involved, because you're investing in, you got 3 states here you're investing in. You're investing in Washington, Florida, and Texas. All right. They all come down to your one Wyoming holding company. Now, when these entities are set up, all of these up here are what we call disregarded. That means they don't have to file any tax returns. No tax returns. How simple is that, right? You set them up, you don't have to file a federal tax return. So before you start thinking, oh, this is going to be complicated for my CPA, no, it's not. It's really simple. Now, when we create the Wyoming Limited Liability Company down here, when we set this up, we can choose to treat it as a disregarded entity as well. But I wouldn't do that, okay? What we like to do is set this entity up as a partnership. Okay, so we set it up as a partnership. And what that's going to allow you to do, then by setting up as a partnership, you do have to file a tax return. Okay, you're going to file a 1065, but it's going to increase your bankability. And what do I mean by that? Well, here's what happened. One of the benefits of doing so many tax returns and building a tax department out and working with real estate investors the way we do is that we have developed strategies, not only from the asset protection side and the tax planning side, but just how we prepare the tax returns for our clients to help them do more. And we realized that when we had clients who were setting up their structures or owning properties in their own name or strictly through disregarded entities, that their ability to go out and continue to grow was getting hampered by their tax returns. Because when you own property in your own name, let's say you own property, I had 3 rentals in my own name, or I own them all through disregarded entities so they don't file tax returns, they're going to show up on my Schedule E. That's where your rental real estate income goes. And if you had $50,000 in rental income for this year, and you wanted to buy another property and you went to a lender and you applied for a loan, they're going to run what's called a debt to income ratio to see if you qualify for that additional loan. And when they do that, they're going to add up all your income. Well, when they look at your 1040 and they see you have $50,000 in rental income there, they're going to discount that. Rather than say you made $50,000 in rental income this year, they're going to look at that and say, no, you didn't. You made $38,000 in rental income. They're going to take $12,000 away. Actually, a little more than that. Why? Because the lending guidelines require that they discount your income by 25%. Many of them I've seen have done it as much as 30% to cover vacancies. So when we started seeing this and working with our clients and going, wow, so you're struggling to acquire more property because your tax returns are hurting you because they're not giving you the full credit. We got to figure this out. And what we found out is that if we set up our structures as a partnership down here, this blue box, it goes on a different area of your tax return. It goes on page 2 of your Schedule E. So if I put $50,000 on page 2 of my Schedule E, rather than on page 1 where the disregarded stuff goes, or the stuff you own in your own name, when our clients go in for a loan, you get 100% of the $50,000. And it just came about, this was years ago, we started studying this, is that, hey, those people that were using the partnership strategy were able to get more deals done because they look better to lenders. And it also corresponds to the fact that we started building out a funding department inside of Andersen. I'll share with that a little bit later for you to help our clients obtain financing. And we started to see what the lenders were asking. Like, all right, we need to change our structures to help our clients do more. And so this is another common mistake that we find, that when people are setting up their structures, they don't understand this side of it. And if you set it up the right way and you set that blue box up and you choose partnership tax status, I know you got to file a tax return, but it's going to help you on the borrowing side. And isn't that what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to ensure that you can go out there and build generational wealth, increase your passive income. So in order to do that, I got to make you look as good as you can to a lender. Now, there's other benefits that come from this as well. You have reduced audit risk by setting it up with the partnership. And when you start to do bigger deals, you're going to look like you're a more sophisticated investor. So this is really the way we like to do it with our structuring, to ensure that you're checking all the boxes. You have asset protection, you have tax planning, you have business planning, the 3 legs of the stool that I was bringing up earlier today. That's what I just checked, all 3 legs for you. Now, don't take my word for it. People who don't do it the right way. I mean, here's an email we received from a client that came to one of our events and we started working with. Oh no, this isn't the one. It's this one right here. He said, hey, the underwriter of the 2 different lenders we've been working with have dragged on for 3 months because they're not sure how to value Schedule E rental income, right? The debt to income ratio was not in conformance with the requirements. So this individual right here, real estate investor, I told him 2 things. I said, number 1, You need to run your business as a C corporation because your S corporation tax status is going to screw up your loans. That's the first problem you're going to have. Second problem you're going to have is your debt to income ratio because you have all your properties in your own name or through disregarded entities. Again, he was structured by a CPA. CP didn't understand the investing side, the business planning side. So we got him figured out. As you can say, he says, stay well no matter what, we're blessed. And he's so happy to be working with us. So this is what we want to do for you when we're putting together these plans and we have a strategy session. We're going to be designing out your plan with this in mind to make sure that it's going to be protected. All right. Now, as far as one other thing, commercial real estate, multifamily, if you want to invest in that type of, or make that type of investment, that's a different animal. Okay. So when you're going to use, if you're going to go out there and you're going to buy multifamily, which is greater than 4 units, say 5 units. In that situation, you're going to set up a limited liability company and you're going to close in the name of that LLC. But here's what you don't want to do. Is you don't want to do what I just showed you earlier, is have it owned 100% by the Wyoming company down here and make this one a disregarded LLC like we would with the single family stuff or the residential stuff. You could, but you have to know what questions to ask. So in this scenario, what happened is I was contacted off of YouTube. A guy wanted to set up a consultation with me and a strategy session. And my assistant said, all right, Clint charges $750 for a 1-hour strategy session. The guy's like, yeah, no problem. Can we get it set up today? No, he couldn't do it today, but we got him on my schedule. And he had this problem. He said, he didn't even have this. He just set up an LLC. He said, I'm trying to sell my building. It was a multifamily property that he bought, that he rehabbed, stabilized, and now he's trying to flip it. He'd owned it for a couple of years. He'd listed it for sale. Buyer number 1 came in, and then he lost him on the financing contingency. Buyer number 2 came in, and he lost her on the financing contingency. Buyer number 3 now has a property tied up under contract. And he's saying, what's going on in your experience, Clint? Why aren't these things closing? So first question was this: does it appraise? He goes, oh yeah, under market. I said, okay, so let me look at your structure. You got it in an LLC. Does the LLC file a tax return? And he didn't know the answer to that. And I said, well, where does it show up on your 1040? And I said, do you have a 1040? Is it readily accessible? And he had a PDF of it. I said, send it over. So as I'm just chatting with him, he emails it to me and I look at his 1040. There it is, Schedule E, page 1, lists out that property. I said, here's your problem. You got the property in an LLC that's a disregarded entity. And in my experience, when you're trying to sell multifamily or commercial property, these lenders, they're financing these buyers, they want tax returns for the LLC. And if you can't give them a tax return, they don't want to do the deal because it doesn't fit in their underwriting guidelines. They got to have a tax return for it. So I asked him, I said, how many times have you been asked for a tax return? This time and this time. I go, how about this time? He said, yeah, they just asked for a tax return. And you don't provide them one, do you? Because you don't have one for the LLC. And I said, in my experience, this is going to fall through as well. Because these types of lenders are looking for tax returns to verify your income and expenses with regards to this property so they can loan against it, because that income stream is going to be a component of the lending process to see what type of income the property is bringing in. Now, whether or not it's right for them to ask this and hinge the loan on it, it's not relevant. It's their money. They set the rules. But I've been down this road before where I have lost deals when I first started investing because I didn't understand this aspect of the investing, that when you're dealing with this type of stuff and you have LLCs, lenders are going to hound you for tax returns. And if you don't give it to them, they walk. And I've had that happen to me. So, the natural next question is, how do you fix it? And for him, there really wasn't a solution. I said, there's 2 things you can do. You either owner finance, seller finance. A lot of risk in multifamily if you do that, because the buyer may not know how to run it. They destroy it, and then you have to take the property back. Other thing you can do is do a drop. You take it out, put it in your own name. You're going to have to season it for probably 6 months or so. title's held in your name, then bring it back to market. The problem with that is you're going to get low ball offers because now people are going to think there's a problem with it because you pulled it off market. So unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do in this scenario that's advantageous to you. But where did this all start? This all started with someone who set up a structure that didn't know what is the best solution for this client. Because again, it comes back to knowing the questions to ask, right? You got to ask somebody. So if you came to us and you sat down with our strategist and you said, hey, I've got a multifamily. First question I'm going to ask you, well, what do you intend to do with it? Do you plan to sell within the next 5 years? Because if the answer to that is yes, then we're going to set up this LLC as a partnership. So it's filing a tax return. So I can help you get that deal sold. Because isn't that what you want? You want to be in a position where you've got asset protection and the ability to sell when the time comes. Let me help you get there. So really, really important. When I've been telling you, it's not a one size fits all. Know the investment and then create the structure that's going to make that investment a success. That's what we do. So I saw somebody just say, hey, if you did this in California, would you pay $800? Yes, you would. You would be paying $800 if this was in California. Or you could use a statutory trust if you didn't want to pay the $800, and we would put it into a statutory trust, tax as a partnership. So there's different ways to deal with this to make sure it's going to work out for you. All right, we've been going about an hour. Let's do this. We'll take a 10-minute break, and we come back. Here's what I'm going to cover. Now we're going to step on the other side. I'll show you how to protect. Say you're going to invest in a duplex or something. I'll show you how to protect that. We'll talk a little bit about flipping property. If you want to flip or wholesale, what you're going to do there. More importantly, I'm going to show you how to protect your personal residence. Guys, I'll see you back in 10 minutes.